Hi, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you had a good week also. This week you're going to be reading a chapter about the Deutero-Pauline letters. This is basically focusing on letters that are known as pseudonymous letters and pastoral letters. So let me just say a few words about that. You've already read a chapter about St. Paul, and in that chapter you read about the genuine Pauline letters. Those are the letters that we actually think St. Paul wrote, whereas the rest of these letters we think that people use Paul's name as a pseudonym. And you might be wondering, why would they do that? I mean, essentially, most of the books in the New Testament are written by anonymous authors, and they gave credit to well-known people so that their piece of writing would be credible. And also, they did hear these things from other people. And so even if they're an anonymous person writing it, it's still based on what St. Paul said or what St. Luke said, or, so on and so forth. And so that's where we get kind of this idea of pseudonymity. And we don't think these letters were written by Paul. There's lots of different reasons for that, but it seems to have a different theology in these letters than the ones that we know he wrote. And also the theology is a little bit more developed, which suggests a later date of composition. And we think Paul would have been martyred around 65 AD. And so these letters are penned by someone else. They say that they're written by Paul, but again, we don't think that they were written by Paul. And they do give a lot of commentary on different women and the role of women. For example, in Ephesians, you find that real famous passage that says, wives, be submissive to your husbands, and husbands, love your wives. And I know every time I heard that when I was younger, it used to make me really angry. But today, when I think about the historical context and realize that this was kind of a given, that this is how men treated women, then it seems a lot less problematic. And really the radical statement in there is that husbands should love their wives, because that wasn't really how they treated their wives at the time. Anyway, so these different letters that you're going to read about, primarily Colossians and Ephesians, are two that are focused on. You'll read about some different communities, some things that were going on at the time. One real common thread, though, is that in these churches, all the churches that Paul set up, these are letters written to those churches. And in those churches, after Paul left, and we don't know if it was 2 weeks after Paul left or 2 years after Paul left, but different preachers would come to town and they would say things that, were contradictory to what Paul had said. And so a lot of his letters really did warn them against false teachers and warn them about people that would lead them astray, and really make an argument for Paul's main themes. Ephesians letter, again, talks about the household and the role of women and men. The Colossians letter also gives insight into different women. And you'll read about someone named Nympha. And again, it just helps you to see how women were treated, and some women that really stood out at the time, which was pretty countercultural and pretty shocking that they're even mentioned. You'll also read about pastoral letters, and the pastoral letters are ones that were written to church leaders, specifically trying to guide and direct them on how to guide their church. So those are real interesting because we find more of the condemning kind of against women statements there. And also we read some descriptions for different roles of church leaders, which also included women. And so there's a real wealth of information here about women, and I think you'll find it really interesting. So you do have a discussion this week. You won't have a discussion next week, because at the end of next week is the paper that's due on the 7th. Again, it's a 4 to 6 page paper. You don't need a cover page. You should have an intro, a body, and a conclusion. Cite your sources as you use them. Don't use any personal pronouns. You need 4 outside sources, and there should be a works cited page at the end. Next week, I did want to warn you, too, that there isn't a PowerPoint for Chapter 7. It's a very short chapter. It's the last chapter in the book. And this week, you're reading an article about the Virgin Mary. And next week in the video, I will lecture more about the Virgin Mary and our teachings about her. That's what you're going to be researching about anyway, and it fits in well with next week. So make sure you watch that video next week because there will be information that I share that you'll be tested over. So I hope you have a really good, productive week. I hope you're enjoying this nice change in weather, and sorry about my dog. Bye.